This was not how Clara Mitchell envisioned meeting her fiancé's father for the first time. The emergency room at St. Mary's was engulfed in its usual chaos on the third consecutive shift she was covering. She had been working non-stop, stepping in for a sick colleague. After 2 long days on her feet, exhaustion was setting in. Her eyes felt fuzzy, and her hands trembled slightly as she completed another chart. "Derek, we have a patient with a laceration in cubicle 3, called out Marissa, the head nurse, waving a medical card. "Looks like a work-related injury." Clara nodded, swiftly tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear as she made her way to the examination room. Inside, a robust man in his 50s with broad shoulders sat on the exam table. His left arm was wrapped in a blood-soaked rag, yet his demeanor was astonishingly calm, as if the deep wound were no more than a minor inconvenience. "Paul Archer," he said, glancing at her name tag with intensity. "Had a rough run-in with some machinery, nothing too serious."
"Let me be the judge of that," Clara smiled, putting on sterile gloves and expertly unwrapping the bloody cloth. "Are you a mechanic?"
"I own a workshop over on 5th Street, he said, his voice steady. "You might have seen my sign for Archer's auto repair." She examined the wound, feeling the weight of his steady gaze on her. Something about that gaze made her feel uneasy, though she maintained her professional demeanor. "So, I hear you're engaged to my son," he said, interrupting her thoughts. Caught off guard, Clara blinked. "Excuse me?" "Benjamin Archer," he continued. "Tall guy, works in architecture. Told me he proposed to a girl in the emergency room. Guess it's not such a big world after all." "I'm a resident," Clara corrected him, her heart racing as it finally dawned on her. "You're Benjamin's father. He has told me so much about you. I just didn't expect to meet under such circumstances." The combination of awkwardness and embarrassment made her cheeks flush. Benjamin had described his father as an auto mechanic, but she had envisioned someone less imposing. Paul studied her for a moment. "I see what my son sees in you," he remarked, his compliment lending an unexpected edge to the situation. Distracted, Clara focused on the wound. "This is deep, Mr. Archer. You're going to need at least 10 stitches, and I'll start with the anesthesia now." He smiled, watching her draw the anesthetic into the syringe. "Just call me Paul. We'll be family soon." The upcoming wedding in early fall had already been the topic of much conversation between her and Benjamin. When he had offered to move in with her temporarily during her apartment's renovation, it seemed logical. They were planning on living together after the wedding anyway, and the extra time would only strengthen their relationship. "Dad won't mind," Benjamin assured her with a warm hug as they packed her belongings. "The house is big enough for everyone to have their own space." The day they moved in, Paul greeted them on the doorstep, welcoming her with open arms. "Welcome to our home, Clara," he said, with a friendly smile, effortlessly carrying her suitcase. "I hope you will like it here." As they settled into the spacious 2-story house on a quiet street, Clara took in the well-maintained yard, a 2-car garage and a small pool, all signs of the middle-class American dream achieved through years of hard work. "Mum picked it out," Benjamin said, noticing her admiration as they ascended the wide staircase. "We hadn't changed much since she passed." Benjamin's mother had succumbed to cancer 5 years prior, and subsequently father and son had maintained the house in pristine condition, as if preserving the memory of the woman who once filled it with life. Clara had been placed in Benjamin's spacious room on the 2nd floor, equipped with large windows and a beautiful view of the garden. Paul's bedroom was located in another wing of the house, maintaining a polite, but reserved relationship with his future daughter-in-law that suited them both just fine. However, when Benjamin travelled for work, which seemed to happen more frequently, Clara often had dinners alone with Paul. He would ask her about her work and share humorous anecdotes about life in the workshop, even reminiscing about Benjamin's childhood. Their exchanges were pleasant enough, but a subtle tension lingered beneath the surface. Since moving in, Clara had been wrestling with insomnia, a challenge that had plagued her during stressful times in her life. The added pressures of wedding planning and her busy hospital schedule appeared to worsen the issue, and she considered seeking help. "You look pale, Clara," Benjamin remarked one morning, kissing her gently before leaving. "Maybe you should see a specialist." She resisted for a while, trying various folk remedies, warm milk with honey, soothing herbal teas, and even meditation, but nothing eased her sleepless nights. Finally, she conceded and made an appointment with a neurologist who listened intently to her symptoms, performed necessary tests, and prescribed a mild sleeping pill. "Start with half a tablet before bedtime," he advised. "If the effect isn't enough, you can increase it to a whole one, but don't exceed the dosage or take it longer than 3 weeks without consulting me again." To her relief, the medication worked effectively from the very first night. For the first time in ages, Clara slept deeply without waking, but soon she noticed something unsettling. Upon waking, she often felt utterly drained, as if she hadn't rested at all. Alongside this fatigue came a deep sense of unease, as if something had transpired during the night that slipped away from her memory. By early July, her health continued to decline, initially attributed to adjusting to the medication and an intense work schedule. Along with persistent fatigue, she started to experience night sweats, a mild rise in temperature, and general weakness. "That sounds like the summer flu," mused Emily, her colleague in the infectious disease department, dismissing Clara's symptoms during a lunch break. "Everyone's battling it these days. Hot weather and air conditioning take a toll." Though Clara nodded in agreement, a nagging voice kept insisting that something was wrong. A week later, as swollen lymph nodes appeared in her neck and armpits, accompanied by an unusual rash, Clara could no longer ignore her instincts. She requested a comprehensive blood test, including tests for infections, saying it was standard procedure before marriage, a precaution she and Benjamin had already undergone at the start of their relationship. "You can come back for the results on Monday," the lab technician stated, picking up the vial of blood. "Or should I email them to you?" "I'll come in myself," Clara replied, rolling up the sleeve of her lab coat. She felt anxious, but reassured that this was merely routine. Monday arrived with unexpected swiftness. As she finished up a patient's discharge paperwork, a nurse called out, "Doctor, Reed is looking for you. It's urgent." Dr. Reed, now the elderly lab manager who had once been her professor, wore a noticeably grave expression as she entered his office. "Close the door, please," he instructed, indicating the chair across from his desk. Clara's heart raced. This could only mean trouble. "Is something wrong with my labs?" she asked, attempting to keep her composure. "I'm afraid so. Your HIV test is positive." The world around her tilted. Panic rose as she grasped the armrests tightly, struggling to remain seated. "There must be some mistake," she stammered, her mouth drying out. "There's got to be a mistake with the analysis." "We've double-checked it," Dr. Reed replied gently, thumbing through her results. "Both the antibody test and the PCR indicate unequivocally that you are positive." "But She trailed off, unable to articulate her thoughts. "This isn't possible." "Have you had unprotected intercourse in the last 6 months?" he asked, maintaining a professional demeanor. "Only with Benjamin, and we were both tested before we started dating. He was clean. I was clean. We've been faithful. Dr. Reed nodded, sympathetic. The facts are clear. The infection is present in your system and appears to be relatively recent, approximately 2 to 3 months ago. This is indicated by the antibody ratio and the presence of acute phases. Clara froze. 2 to 3 months ago. It coincided with her moving into the Archer household. You need to inform your partner, he continued, breaking the heavy silence. Legally, he has a right to know and must be tested. You also need to compile a list of anyone you've had close contact with. Still in shock, she forced herself to nod, too stunned to verbalize her thoughts. Clara, Dr. Reed interjected, noticing her blank expression. I know this feels like the end of the world, but I want you to know that modern therapy can effectively manage the disease. You can lead a full life if you begin treatment right away. It's no longer a death sentence. His words passed through her like a ghost, unable to penetrate the fog of disbelief and denial that enveloped her. Suddenly a thought flickered through her mind. Paul. Paul Archer, she whispered almost inaudibly. What? Dr. Reed asked, leaning forward. Nothing, she replied abruptly, standing up. Thank you for the information. I need time to think.
The rest of the day felt surreal as Clara mechanically went about her duties. All her thoughts returned to the diagnosis and the impossibility of the situation. Benjamin couldn't have infected her, she was certain of it. They had both been screened at the beginning of their relationship, and there had been no discrepancies. The reality, however, took on an almost nightmarish quality as her mind drifted to the only other person who had access to her without her full awareness, Paul.
That evening, as she sat in the kitchen, mindlessly going through a medical reference book, the front door slammed open. Paul entered, his clothing smelling of motor oil and whiskey, suggesting he had stopped by the bar after a long day at the shop. Bad day? He asked, noticing her pale, exhausted face. A little tired, Clara tried to smile, though her lips trembled slightly. Paul opened the refrigerator and grabbed a bottle of beer, effortlessly twisting off the cap. Benjamin called today. He'll be delayed another 3 days. There are some issues with the project. 3 more days alone with him, Clara thought silently, feeling uneasy. Where were you this afternoon? She asked casually, though the question felt more like an instinctive probe. I was at the workshop, talking to a parts supplier, he replied slowly, a flicker of something crossing his face. Nothing happened? She pressed, her voice betraying her anxious curiosity. Paul's gaze narrowed slightly as he observed her, sensing the change in her demeanor. Everything's fine, just work, he said, but she could see beneath his calm surface a sudden tension that filled the air. I just need some rest, she said, abruptly standing up. I think I should go to bed. As she retreated to her room, she could feel Paul's eyes on her, intensifying a growing discomfort she had struggled to shake since moving in. Once inside, she locked the door and leaned against it, feeling the weight of the world press down on her chest. The diagnosis burned in her mind like a fever. She should call Benjamin, tell him what was happening, what had happened, but doubt paralyzed her. With trembling hands, she dialed his number, but it went to voicemail. Benjamin, it's me, she said, her voice shaky as she spoke. Call me as soon as you can. It's important. Very important. After hanging up, she paced across the room, glancing out the window to see Paul's silhouette moving in the dim light of his room. The dark thought crept into her mind. She felt a burning need for proof. Spurred by urgency, she opened her laptop and searched for hidden cameras online, scrolling through options that offered everything from professional tools to simple gadgets. Same-day delivery, she thought. Lost in her thoughts, she selected a mini camera that could blend into its surroundings and placed the order. The camera arrived the next day in an unassuming package no one would suspect. As Clara made her way home during a lunch break, her mind raced with possibilities. Where would she hide it for the best view? Once home, she ensured the door was locked, then removed the tiny camera from its packaging. The instructions stated it could run for up to 12 hours on a single charge, activating with motion detection to conserve battery and memory. After deliberating, she decided to place it on a bookshelf near the bed, nestled between her books for concealment. With the camera securely in place and operating, Clara felt a mix of dread and anticipation. Days passed as she continued taking her sleeping pills, the medication creating an odd sense of security despite her tumultuous thoughts. Each morning, she checked the tape, but nothing suspicious showed up until Benjamin returned from his work trip. Relief washed over her upon seeing him. "You never said what you wanted to discuss," he reminded her one morning over coffee. "Your message sounded urgent." Clara faltered, unsure how to approach the revelation yet. "It can wait," she finally said. "I've just been worried. How was the business trip?" Benjamin detailed the struggles with clients and the pressure to finalize blueprints, but her attention drifted. That night, after dinner with Paul, Clara locked herself in her room, replaying the events in her mind. As she took her sleeping pills once more, she mentally prepared for the night ahead. She awoke the following day feeling strangely heavy, like a burden rested atop her chest. The clock blinked nearly noon. She had overslept. Groggy from the medication, Clara shook off the disorientation and hurried to check her hidden camera. The LED light confirmed it was recording. With trembling fingers, she inserted the memory card into her laptop and clicked play. The first few hours showed only darkness and silence. Then she fast-forwarded, anticipation building within her as the timer ticked away. Suddenly, at around 2 hours and 53 minutes into the recording, the doorknob turned slowly and she inhaled sharply. Paul stepped into the room, wearing a relaxed outfit, his movements seemingly deliberate and stealthy. He closed the door behind him with a slow, calculated motion, and the atmosphere in the room shifted intensely. Clara's heart raced as she watched, entranced and horrified at the same time. Paul paused at the foot of the bed, his eyes locking onto her sleeping form, illuminated by the faint glow of moonlight streaming through the window. He moved closer, his expression reflecting a mix of fascination and something darker as he watched her lying there, blissfully unaware. He reached out and gently pulled back the blanket, exposing her nightgown. The sight filled Clara with dread, and she found herself gripping the edge of her desk, her knuckles turning white. She resisted the urge to shut off the recording, but couldn't tear her gaze from the screen. Paul leaned in, his hand brushing against her face, then traveling down her neck. The moment felt surreal, like watching a twisted nightmare unfold. Clara's stomach churned, nausea rising as she continued to witness the horrifying violation of her trust. Paul's hands slid lower, tugging at her nightgown as he settled beside her. Her heart raced, the weight of disbelief and horror crashing over her like a tidal wave. As the footage continued, her mind bombarded her with questions. How long had this been going on? Was this the first time? The video recorded every moment, every indiscretion, and she felt physically ill, knowing she had been so vulnerable. Suddenly feeling overwhelmed, Clara sprang out of her chair and rushed to the bathroom, barely making it in time to throw up. She cast cold water on her face, attempting to wash away the horrifying images from her mind. But there was no escaping it. The reality of her situation pressed down on her like an anchor, forcing her under. Returning to her laptop, she had to finish watching the tape, needing to know the entire truth. It felt morbid and cruel, but she pushed through, finally reaching the end. It was undeniably clear Paul had taken advantage of her while she lay unconscious. The tape showed him carefully adjusting her clothing, covering her with a blanket as if nothing had happened, then slipping quietly out of the room. The realization settled in her bones like ice. This man, her fiancé's father, had violated her while she trusted him. And the implications of what that meant for her and Benjamin were unbearable. Desperate for clarity, her instincts screamed to call the police immediately, but she hesitated. She had evidence, but what next? An investigation? Public trial? How would Benjamin react when he learned that his father, the man he held in such high regard, was a predator? Unable to think through the whirlwind of emotions, she bit her lip and turned to the flash drive, the digital recording hidden away for safekeeping. Perhaps it was a lifeline, a key to both protection and justice. She created backups of the video, uploading it to a secure cloud storage platform to ensure the evidence was preserved, no matter what happened. As she was about to breathe a sigh of relief at taking some control over the situation, the sound of the front door opening startled her. Panic coursed through Clara as she realized Paul was home sooner than expected. "Clara?" His voice carried up the stairs, laced with a casual tone that sent chills down her spine. "I'm here!" she called out, her voice strained as she hastily closed her laptop, hiding the covert actions of the past few days. He ascended the stairs and moments later, he knocked on her door. "Everything okay? You seem a little off today." She forced a smile. "Just tired from work. Long shifts, you know?" "Of course. Well, if you need anything, I'm just down the hall." He paused, tension settling into the air. "We should have dinner together soon, just the two of us, since Benjamin's busy. What do you think?" A pit formed in her stomach, and she replied cautiously, "I'll let you know." "All right," he said, his tone almost too friendly, before walking away. As she sat there, Clara's mind raced. What was she going to tell Benjamin? How could she even begin to explain the impossible? Her hands shook as she dialed his number again, the sense of urgency returning. But instead of waiting for him to return home to share her fears, she decided she wouldn't keep quiet any longer. That night, as Benjamin finally walked in, just a hint of fatigue evident in his eyes after his business trip, her heart leapt with mix of relief and dread. "Hey, you," he smiled softly, but she knew the disguise had to come down now. "Benjamin, we need to talk," she said urgently, motioning for him to sit down. "What's going on?" He sat, concern etching across his face. Taking a deep breath, Clara forced herself to meet his gaze. "I've been diagnosed with HIV positive." He froze, confusion morphing to horror. "What? How is that possible?" "I don't know," she admitted, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. "I found out last week, but I didn't know how to tell you. I've been trying to wrap my head around it. But there's more. Something else you need to know." "More? What do you mean?" His brow furrowed, a mixture of concern and confusion filling his voice. "I set up a hidden camera in my room because I felt something was wrong," Clara said, her voice shaking. "I needed proof. Last night I watched the footage and I saw things I never wanted to see. Your father, Paul, he violated me." Benjamin's face went pale as the shocking truth sank in. "What do you mean?" he whispered, disbelief twisting his features.
"I have video evidence," Clara said, her breath quickening. "He came into my room while I was asleep. I didn't know until I saw it for myself. It was him. He took advantage of me." The air in the room turned thick with tension as the words hung between them. Benjamin stared at her, his eyes wide with shock, processing the pain and betrayal that lay beneath the surface.
"Clara, are you sure? This can't be true," he stammered, disbelief clouding his judgment.
"I watched the tape, Benjamin," she insisted, emotions swelling within her. "It's all there. He touched me while I was unconscious. It was horrible."
I can't believe this," he exclaimed, running a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "My father! How could he? How could he do this to you?" Anger and heartbreak danced behind his eyes as he fought to reconcile the truth with the man he had known. "Please, you have to hear me out," Clara pleaded. "I didn't want to believe it either, but he's dangerous. I couldn't keep this to myself. It's not just about me anymore. This isn't just about my diagnosis. It's about making sure he can't hurt anyone else." Benjamin stood up abruptly, pacing the length of the room as he absorbed the gravity of her words. "We need to go to the police," he said finally, determination flooding his voice. "Yes, exactly," Clara replied, relief flooding her as she realized he was on board. "We need to report it. I have the video as evidence."
He swung around to face her, fire igniting in his eyes. "I'm not going to let him get away with this. No way. He has to pay."
"But we have to be careful," Clara warned, her anxiety creeping back in. "If we rush in without evidence or a solid plan, it could backfire. He's still my fiancé's father, and he might try to manipulate this situation." Benjamin looked at her, the righteous anger transforming into concern. "You're right. We need to think this through. Maybe we can consult with someone who's experienced in these situations first." Clara nodded, grateful for his understanding. "I was thinking about contacting Detective Reed. He's been handling my case from the beginning. He could help us navigate this." "That's a good idea," Benjamin agreed. "Let's do it. Let's take control of this situation before he can do any more damage." As the conversation turned toward logistics, Clara felt a flicker of hope. They would confront this challenge together, turning their shared pain into a tool for fighting back. By preparing their case, they would take a stand against the abuse Clara had endured and ensure the lives of others wouldn't be affected in the same way. While gathered in the living room, they worked together to compile the necessary evidence, detailing the timeline of events that had led to Clara's diagnosis, the abuse she had experienced, and the hidden recording. They tried to remain focused despite the emotional weight of what they were discussing. "All right," Clara finally said, steeling her resolve. "Let's call Detective Reed." As she dialed the number, Clara's hands trembled with anxiety, but steeling herself, she reminded herself of the strength she had gained from this ordeal. Their voices rang with determination as they relayed the situation to Detective Reed, who assured them he would meet with them soon to discuss their next steps. After their conversation concluded, Clara and Benjamin just sat together in silence, each navigating their emotions. "We're going to get through this," he said, breaking the stillness, his voice steady. "Yes, together," Clara replied, gratitude swelling in her chest. "I couldn't do this without you. I'm so grateful for your support." As the weeks passed, they prepared for the impending legal battle and began to reach out to advocacy groups that supported victims of sexual assault. Together they educated themselves on their rights, fighting against not only Paul's misconduct, but also the stigma surrounding Clara's diagnosis. The day of their meeting with Detective Reed arrived, and Clara felt a mixture of nerves and determination swirling inside her as they drove to the police station. Benjamin sat beside her, a calming presence in the storm of uncertainty that filled her mind. Upon arriving, they were escorted into a private office where Detective Reed greeted them with a warm but professional demeanor. "I'm glad to see you both again," he said, gesturing for them to take a seat. "I understand you wanted to discuss new developments regarding the case." Clara took a deep breath, her resolve solidifying as she began to share the details of what had happened since their last discussion. "I've been diagnosed with HIV, she stated, her voice steady, but with an undercurrent of anxiety. "And I have evidence that can link my fiancé's father, the man I trust, to my assault." Detective Reed furrowed his brow, nodding seriously. "This is important information. What you have on record could change everything. Let's discuss the video." Clara pulled out the flash drive, handing it over to the detective as her heart raced. "I recorded him coming into my room while I was asleep. He took advantage of me while I was unconscious." Reed took the drive and inserted it into his computer, the screen illuminating with the recording. Clara watched his expression shift as he began to process the shocking footage. "This is powerful evidence," he remarked, pausing the playback. "This changes the context of your previous allegations and provides a timeline for the abuse." "How do we move forward?" Clara asked, a knot tightening in her stomach. "We will initiate a formal investigation with this evidence," Reed assured them. "We can approach this situation from multiple angles, assault, and we will also prepare for the potential ramifications of your diagnosis. Your safety is paramount in this process." Clara and Benjamin shared a look, the understanding of the fight ahead coursing through them. "What can we do to help?" Benjamin asked, his determination unwavering.
"Continue speaking out and educating yourselves about the process," Reed instructed. "We may request your testimony as this goes further. The more information we have, the stronger our case will be. I'll also ensure that you receive any necessary support methods available through victim services." With newfound clarity, they discussed further details about the next steps. Reed explained how he would gather statements from anyone involved and launch an investigation into Paul's actions, as well as checking if there had been any prior incidents that might corroborate their claims.
As the meeting concluded and they walked out, Clara felt a sense of purpose take root within her. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about standing up for herself and others who might face similar situations. In the weeks that followed, the investigation unfolded, and Clara and Benjamin found themselves advocating for awareness and change, sharing their story at community events, and promoting support for victims of abuse. They became involved in raising funds for local non-profits that focused on educating the public about sexual assault and HIV, turning their pain into power. As they built their lives together amid this new reality, Clara felt her confidence growing each day. No longer a victim, she emerged as a beacon of resilience, using her experiences to create a ripple effect of healing and hope. Then one afternoon, as they were preparing for an event dedicated to survivors' stories, Clara received a phone call from Detective Reed. "Clara, I have an update regarding Paul Archer's case," he said. "We found substantial evidence that links him to previous misconduct, and the prosecutor is ready to move forward with formal charges." A rush of emotions flooded Clara's heart. What does this mean? It means he will face legal consequences for his actions. You're going to play a pivotal role in this process, and with the evidence we've gathered, I believe we have a strong case. Clara relayed the information to Benjamin, whose face lit up with pride and relief. "This is the breakthrough we've been hoping for." "Together," Clara emphasized, wrapping her arms around him. "We did this together." As they stepped onto the podium at the event where they would share their journey, Clara felt a surge of empowerment. In that moment, she realized that their fight had the potential to reach beyond just their own lives. The support of each other and the proactive actions they had taken had transformed them from victims into advocates. As they spoke to the crowd, Clara could feel the connection she had forged with those listening. Their stories intertwined, and she knew that every person who stood up, shared, and showed their strength added another layer of resilience to their community. "We are not defined by our struggles," Clara said, her voice steady and strong. "Together, we will face the challenges, and together, we will rise above them." As applause erupted, Clara and Benjamin shared a knowing look. They had been through a harrowing journey, but they had emerged stronger, united in their mission to foster understanding and kindness. And as they stepped off the stage, Clara understood that this was just the beginning of their greater journey, one that would help change lives beyond their own. As the days turned into weeks, Clara and Benjamin continued to engage with various community advocacy groups, working to ensure that their message of resilience and awareness reached as many people as possible. They hosted workshops and informational sessions about living with HIV, educating others on the importance of early diagnosis, treatment, and the realities of stigma. Clara found her voice more powerful than ever as she shared her story openly and without shame. "Every story matters," Clara would often say at the end of each session. "By sharing our experiences, we empower others to do the same. We can break the silence and stigma surrounding both sexual assault and HIV together." As their outreach efforts grew, so did Clara's confidence. With Benjamin beside her, she felt capable of tackling any challenge that came their way. There were difficult moments, memories of her past would occasionally resurface, and the weight of her diagnosis still loomed. But she had built a support system that helped her navigate those challenging emotions. Their relationship deepened too. They spoke openly about their future and dreams. One evening, while they were cooking dinner together, Clara caught Benjamin watching her intently. "What is it?" she smiled, stirring the pot on the stove. "I can't help but think about how much you've grown through all of this," he said, admiration in his voice. "You're stronger than you know." "It's you and all this support that has helped me become who I am," she replied, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I honestly wouldn't have made it this far without you." "Good, because I plan to stick around for a long time," he teased, leaning in to kiss her softly. Just as they were enjoying the moment, Clara's phone buzzed on the counter. It was a notification from the community center they often collaborated with. Intrigued, she picked it up and read through the message. "They're planning a major fundraising gala next month to raise awareness for sexual assault prevention and HIV education," she said, excitement bubbling in her voice. "They're inviting us to be the keynote speakers." Benjamin grinned wide. Imagine how many lives we could touch with that kind of platform.
"I think we should do it," Clara exclaimed, her heart racing at the thought of sharing their journey with a larger audience. It could be an amazing opportunity to bring more visibility to these issues.
As they began to prepare for their upcoming speech at the gala, Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose. This event wasn't just another speaking engagement, it was a powerful chance to advocate for change on a much larger scale. The night of the gala arrived and Clara stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her outfit with nervous energy. Benjamin entered the room, looking dapper in his suit. "You look stunning," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "Thanks, I feel nervous but excited," she admitted, her stomach fluttering. "You're going to be amazing out there. Just remember why you're doing this," he reassured her, placing a comforting hand on her back. As they arrived at the venue, Clara felt the buzz of energy around her. The hall was elegantly decorated and attendees had begun to fill the room, each person ready to support a vital cause. Clara took a deep breath, reminding herself that their story could make a difference. When it was time for their speech, Clara and Benjamin took the stage together, the audience's attention focused on them. Clara's heart raced as she stepped to the microphone. "Good evening, everyone," she started, her voice steady. "We are so grateful to be here tonight to share our journey and advocate for awareness around two incredibly important issues: sexual assault and HIV." As she shared her story, the struggles, the pain, the journey toward healing, she could see the audience hanging on her every word. She spoke about her diagnosis and the experience of facing the abuse at the hands of someone she should have been able to trust.
Benjamin joined in, sharing his perspective as a partner, emphasizing the importance of support and understanding in difficult times. Together, they illustrated the strength they found in each other and the community they were building through their advocacy.
As they concluded their speech, Clara felt a rush of warmth as applause filled the air. She locked eyes with Benjamin, their shared understanding deepening as they cherished the moment. The gala turned out to be an overwhelming success, raising significant funds for their cause. They connected with many individuals who approached them afterward, sharing their own stories and expressing gratitude for their bravery. Weeks later, as Clara watched the impact of their advocacy ripple through the community, she felt a lingering sense of fulfillment. The challenges they faced only strengthened her resolve, and her relationship with Benjamin blossomed amidst the advocacy work they had embarked upon together. As they sat on the couch one evening, wrapped in each other's arms, Clara turned to Benjamin with a soft smile. "I never thought I would find so much strength in sharing my story. It's amazing how far we've come since those early days." Benjamin brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "You were always strong, Clara. You just needed to let yourself see it."
Clara rested her head against his shoulder, her chest swelling with gratitude and love. "I couldn't have done it without you by my side. You believed in me when I doubted myself. You pushed me to not just survive, but to thrive."
"It's a team effort," he said, a smile dancing on his lips. "And we make a pretty good team." As they sat together in comfortable silence, Clara's mind wandered back to the future they had started to envision together. "What do you think about our wedding plans?" "Maybe we should really finalize the date," she suggested, feeling a flutter of hope. "Absolutely. I want to celebrate our love and everything we've built together, especially after everything we've been through," Benjamin replied, his expression turning serious. "I want the wedding to be a reflection of our journey, not just a formality." "I love that," Clara said, enthusiasm bubbling within her. "We could incorporate elements that highlight our advocacy work, perhaps have a donation option instead of gifts." "That's a great idea. It aligns with who we are now," Benjamin said, nodding in agreement, "and it could raise even more awareness." Encouraged by their shared vision, they began brainstorming ideas for their wedding. They discussed themes that represented their story and the communities they advocated for, from centerpieces that highlighted awareness ribbons to including speeches from those they had inspired along the way. As they made plans, Clara felt the excitement of their love story developing into something even greater. They were ready to not only commit to each other but also to the mission they had built together. One Saturday morning, they went for a walk in a local park, discussing the details of their plans while savoring the first hints of spring blooming around them. People jogged by, children played on the playground, and the atmosphere felt electric with promise. "It feels so liberating to open up our lives to others, doesn't it?" Clara said, looking up at Benjamin as they strolled hand in hand. Fighting for this cause has brought us so much closer." "It has," he agreed. "It's given us purpose. Every time we speak out or connect with someone who needs support, it strengthens what we share. It's not just about us anymore." Just then they stopped by a bench overlooking a pond filled with swans gliding gracefully across the water. "Let's take a moment," Clara suggested, and they sat down, soaking in the tranquility. As they sat quietly, Clara took a deep breath, her heart brimming with optimism. "I've thought a lot about where we are now and where we're headed. I know we've encountered tough times, but I truly believe every one of those challenges was worth it. We're transforming pain into advocacy, love, and empowerment." "Exactly," Benjamin said, turning toward her. "And whatever comes our way, we face it together." Clara's heart fluttered at those words. "I feel like we're only just beginning. There's so much more we can do." A few days later, while they were finalizing the details for their wedding, Clara received a message that jolted her. Detective Reed contacted her with an update on Paul's case. There had been significant developments regarding a potential plea deal as new evidence emerged from the investigation. Feeling a rush of anxiety, Clara and Benjamin set up a meeting with Detective Reed to discuss these developments. As they entered his office, Clara's stomach twisted with apprehension. "Thank you for coming in on such short notice," Reed said, gesturing for them to sit. "I wanted to keep you both updated on how the case is progressing. I have some important news." "What's happening?" Clara asked, her voice thick with apprehension. "Paul has been offered a plea deal. Due to the evidence we have and his previous record, the prosecution believes it presents a strong case for a guilty plea on lesser charges, which would likely involve less prison time than going to trial. He claims he wants to avoid a lengthy legal battle." Benjamin's jaw tightened at the mention of a plea deal. "And what does that mean for Clara and the case?" "It means that he will take responsibility for his actions in a way that acknowledges the harm he's caused," Reed explained. "However, it would mean a reduced sentence, and I understand that's not entirely satisfying."
Clara exchanged a glance with Benjamin, her heart racing. "What do you think we should do?"
"I recommend considering what this means for your mental and emotional well-being," Reed said. "If you feel this path provides some closure and accountability, it might be worth taking, but if you feel that fighting in trial is the only way to validate your experience, that's just as valid. It's ultimately your choice." Clara felt her pulse quicken as she processed the detective's words. It was a heavy decision, one that could either provide swift closure or extend their trauma through a lengthy trial. She looked at Benjamin, who was deep in thought. "What are your thoughts?" Benjamin finally asked her, his voice calm yet serious. "I want him held accountable, but I want to avoid dragging this out longer than necessary. If a plea deal means he acknowledges his actions and takes responsibility, maybe that's the best for both of us," Clara replied, her heart racing. "It would mean he can't deny what he did anymore." "I understand that," Benjamin said, nodding thoughtfully. "But it's hard knowing that he might not face the full consequences of his actions. He needs to understand the gravity of what he's done." Clara took a deep breath, the weight of their journey bearing down on her. "It's true, but I also don't want to relive this in a courtroom if I can avoid it. I'm tired, and I just want to move forward." Detective Reed looked between them thoughtfully. "I can set up a meeting with the prosecution to discuss the specifics of the plea deal, and you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. Ultimately, it's about what you need for your healing process." Clara nodded, feeling a sense of resolve forming. "Thank you, Detective." I think we need to weigh our options before making a final decision." As they left the office, Clara felt both empowered and anxious. This was a pivotal moment in their journey, but it felt fraught with uncertainty. "Whatever you choose, I'm with you," Benjamin said as they walked back to the car. "We'll figure this out together no matter what." "Thank you," Clara replied, taking his hand in hers. "It helps to know that I'm not alone in this. I just want to find a sense of normalcy again." They set a date to meet with the prosecution and discuss the plea deal further. In the days leading up to the meeting, Clara reflected on everything she had been through. With each passing moment, she felt stronger for having faced her fears and vulnerabilities. The day of the meeting arrived and Clara walked into the room where the prosecutor and Detective Reed were already waiting. She felt a mix of nerves and determination bubbling within her as she and Benjamin took seats across from the table. "Thank you for coming in," the prosecutor said, offering a reassuring smile. "We understand this is a challenging situation, and we want to ensure you understand the terms of the plea deal thoroughly." Clara listened carefully as the prosecutor explained the terms, detailing the reductions in potential sentencing Paul might receive and the implications of a guilty plea. It was a lot to take in, and Clara felt the stress weigh heavily on her. "Can you explain the specifics of his punishment?" she finally asked, her heart pounding. "What does it mean for him to accept this plea?" "If he accepts the plea, he will serve a reduced sentence of 2 years in a state facility, and he must also complete a treatment program," the prosecutor explained. "As part of the deal, a portion of the sentence will be served under supervision, along with mandatory counseling." Clara exchanged a look with Benjamin, searching for reassurances in his eyes. "And he'll have to register as a sex offender?" she added, wanting assurance that he would be held accountable. "Yes, that is part of the plea deal," the prosecutor confirmed. "He would be required to register and adhere to regulations afterward." Benjamin squeezed Clara's hand, encouraging her. "What do you think? Does it provide the closure you're looking for?" Clara took a moment to gather her thoughts, feeling the paces they had gone through weighing down on her. "I think it does. He needs to acknowledge what he has done to me and to so many others." With a firm set in her jaw, she looked back at the prosecutor. "If he pleads guilty, I want to make sure he understands how his actions have impacted my life and that of others. I want the opportunity to provide a victim impact statement before he is sentenced." The prosecution nodded, understanding the significance of her request. "That's absolutely within your rights, and we can arrange for that." With the decision made, Clara felt an unexpected sense of relief wash over her. They were taking control of their narrative, steering it toward a resolution that reinforced her strength. The weeks following the plea deal turned into a whirlwind of preparations for Clara's victim impact statement, where she would have the chance to speak directly about the pain and turmoil Paul's actions had caused in her life. As she penned down her thoughts, expressing not only the hurt, but also her determination to move forward and make a difference, she felt empowered by every stroke of the pen. This was her story, one that wouldn't be silenced or forgotten as she was rewriting her own narrative, transforming pain into purpose. On the day of the victim impact statement, Clara felt a blend of nerves and resolve swelling within her. She dressed deliberately, choosing an outfit that made her feel both confident and grounded, her chosen colors reflecting her strength. A sense of purpose fueled her as she prepared to address the court and share her truth, not just for herself, but for others who had suffered in silence. When she and Benjamin arrived at the courthouse, Clara noticed the weight of the atmosphere surrounding her. Friends and supporters had come to show solidarity, and their presence reassured her that she was not alone in this fight. After several tense moments, They were called into the courtroom. Clara took her spot before the judge and the jury. Looking at the chair where Paul sat, eyes downcast and shifting uncomfortably, only solidified her determination. Clara felt ready to reclaim her voice. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady despite the anxiety fluttering in her stomach. "Today, I stand before you not just for myself, but for everyone who has ever felt powerless." As she spoke, Clara recalled the journey she had taken, the early days of fear, the struggle with her diagnosis, the violation of trust, and the fight to reclaim her narrative. She detailed the emotional scars that lingered from the abuse, illustrating how it had impacted her daily life, her relationships, and her self-worth. "I thought I could trust him," she said, a slight tremor in her voice as she glanced at Paul, who seemed to shift uncomfortably at the weight of her words. "I never imagined that someone I should be able to confide in could betray me in such a terrible way." The court listened intently, the silence thick as Clara continued to lay bare her experiences. She explained how the ordeal had changed her life irrevocably, but concluded with a note of empowerment. "I've made it my mission to advocate for those impacted by assault and to educate others about HIV. I believe that sharing our stories can foster understanding and change." As she reached the end of her statement, Clara felt a rush of emotion wash over her, a mix of relief and catharsis. "My wish is that no one else has to endure what I did, and that those who do will know they are not alone. I want my voice to matter, and I want to ensure accountability for his actions." With that, she stepped back, her heart racing, but filled with a sense of accomplishment. She had said what she needed to say, and for the first time in a long time, she felt liberated. After Clara's statement, the prosecutor took over, detailing the evidence, the plea deal, and their request for an appropriate sentence. The judge listened carefully before addressing Paul. "Mr. Archer," he said, his tone stern, "you have been given the opportunity to plead guilty and take responsibility for your actions. It is clear that your behavior has caused significant harm to Ms. Mitchell and has lasting repercussions." As the judge issued the sentence, 2 years with a possibility for parole after a year and mandated counseling, Clara felt a wave of victory wash over her. While no sentence could undo the damage done, it was a step toward justice that empowered her spirit. Afterwards, as they left the courthouse, Clara felt a wave of relief wash over her. She turned to Benjamin, tears of joy welling in her eyes. "We did it. I can't believe we did it." Benjamin pulled her into a tight embrace, his warmth enveloping her. "You faced the darkness and turned it into light," he said softly. "I'm so proud of you, Clara. You changed the game today." As they walked hand in hand, Clara felt a profound sense of hope blossom within her. They had taken back control of their lives. Together, they could turn this chapter into one of advocacy that would inspire others, ensuring that their story of resilience would create ripples of change in their community. In the following weeks, Clara and Benjamin devoted themselves to their advocacy work with renewed vigor. Clara began volunteering at support groups for survivors of abuse, using her experience to help others who felt lost. Alongside Benjamin, she worked with organizations focused on HIV education, breaking down the stigma and fear surrounding the condition. Their love deepened through their shared commitment to a cause larger than themselves. Clara learned that while the road ahead would have its challenges, she had found her voice and purpose, and with that she felt truly empowered. One evening, as they sat together planning an upcoming community event to promote awareness, Benjamin looked at Clara with admiration. "You're an incredible person, you know that?" Clara smiled, warmth spreading through her. I couldn't have gotten this far without you by my side. As they finalized the details, Clara knew this was just the beginning of their journey. Together, they would continue to advocate for change, support one another, and spread hope in a world that so often felt dark.